effective as we can. Let me officially welcome you to the 2015 Children's Week Business Leaders Luncheon. I'm so honored that you're here. Dave and Vance, thank you very much for your leadership on this issue. I think we simply wouldn't be here as a business community working in concert with you if you wouldn't have reached out to us a few years ago. And so pleased to see a room full of people who can make a difference, people who care, and people who can make a difference. I'm obviously Mark Wilson. I have the privilege of serving as President and CEO of the Florida Chamber of Commerce. And I just want to thank you on behalf of the Florida Chamber Foundation trustees that are here, as well as our partners at Florida Tax Watch and the Florida Council of 100. Special thank you to you. It's our great honor to welcome you here to this Business Leaders Luncheon today. I said this last year, but I'm going to say it again this year, and that is that when we talk about early learning, when we talk about our kids, whether it's my kids, your kids, or our community's kids, we're talking about putting the long term ahead of the short term. And I know how much everyone else has to do today. I know how busy you are. And I just want to thank you for taking some time today to put our kids, to put the long term ahead of the short term, to put good policy ahead of difficult politics. It means a lot to me personally, and I know it means a lot to our partners that are here as well. So just quick background. I want to give you a little bit of perspective on why this is so important. So our foundation research tells us that by 2030, right, in the blink of an eye, our state will add another 5 to 6 million residents, and we're going to have to create about 2 million new jobs between now and 2030. And I have to tell you, as Chamber President, when I travel Florida, I often hear people say, why does the business community care about early learning? Why are you in the business of advocating for this issue? And I have to tell you, ignorance is something you're allowed to do in a free country, right? That's one of the benefits of freedom. But economic opportunity is also a benefit of our free enterprise system. And so it's really our responsibility to answer that question, not just with facts, but with everything we have from an advocacy standpoint. So this is as much about economic opportunity and future talent as it is about anything else. Think another way, by 2030, in 2030 rather, there are going to be about 1.3 million people entering the workforce that year that today are under 5 years old. So there's 1.3 million kids that we're talking about today when we talk about the workforce of 2030. And the truth is, there's not a person who could stand up here and tell you what those jobs are going to look like. But we know that we need to start early, and that's the secret. So by 2020, 2/3 of the jobs are going to require more than a high school diploma. And again, as I say every opportunity I get, talent is quickly replacing the incentive in the economic development world. And if Florida can continue to win on the early learning, on the K-12, on the talent spectrum, then Florida will continue to be the #1 place in America. Companies want to go where the talent is, and talent is replacing the economic development incentive. That's what I've been talking to you about for a couple of years. My kids aren't competing with kids from other states. They're not even competing with your kids. They're competing with kids halfway around the world, in China, in Brazil, India, and so forth. And whether they go on to college, or whether they go to a university, or whether they get a degree, a certification program, or whether they go directly into the workplace, our goal is to have an unemployment rate that's lower than 5% and to have an opportunity for every one of those kids and families. And I'm often asked, well, so what's the secret to that? The secret isn't some kind of a special program. The secret is that we all agree that you have to start early. And what we learned last year from our speaker that Dave brought in is that about 85% of a child's brain develops before the age of 3. That had a profound impact on me because I'm supposed to be the person that talks about the business case for this. But when you put the science together with the business case, you actually get an undeniable equation that really causes us to act. Parental involvement is something we've talked about for years. And again, I want to thank Dave Lawrence sent a few of us some reading material, which he always does, ahead of time today. And if you haven't read it yet, Robert Putnam has a book out called Our Kids, The American Dream in Crisis. And there were a couple things that hit me that I thought were worth taking a minute or two of your time to share with you today. In this book, they look at kids entering school how many of them know the alphabet when they show up at school for the first time? How many of them don't know the alphabet when they show up at school for the first time? And I had not seen this data before. I thought it was important to share. So if you're middle class or above, 72% of the kids show up at school, they know the alphabet. But if you are poor, that number is 19%. So think about right there what the implications are to early learning, okay? So if you're middle class or above, 72%, poor, 19%. Further in the book, a few pages later, it talks about something he calls the hug to spank ratio, okay? And that had me, I spent time in the principal's office, believe it or not, growing up, and I was very curious about this. And what we're talking about here is positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement. And let me give you these numbers because they're really very compelling. If you come from a family where the parents have professional degrees, you are going to get 6.3 positives for every 1 negative. Keep that in mind, 6.3 positives for every 1 negative. If you come from a working class family, it's 1.7 positive to 1 negative. If you come from a family in welfare, it's 2.2 negative for every 1 positive. So over the years, when you've heard me talk about breaking the cycle of generational poverty and doing it through equal opportunity and economic opportunity, that's the reason that the Florida Chamber and our partners are here. The data is pretty doggone convincing. Early learning obviously promotes opportunity for everybody here. So when we talk about early learning, we're talking about the right investments. It's not just about more money, it's about the right money, the right investments. We're talking about reducing arrests, reducing juvenile justice costs, better health outcomes, talk about reducing the need for future social services. So early learning isn't simply the right thing to do. I would suggest to you it's a competitive imperative for us. You're going to hear later today from our keynote speaker, a friend of mine, Mike Fernandez. And Mike, I know you've shared your book with us today, and I know you're going to have a chance to talk about it. But I've actually read through this a few times, and I wanted to make, I copied a particular page. I know you have this memorized. It's the one with you in the hammock, actually, it's for your own reference. Mike Fernandez says in this book two things that just stick out. He said, today is a gift. Okay, and if I read the rest of it to you, the punchline there is, you may not get tomorrow. And the punchline is, what are you going to do with it today? But just before that, Mike says, quote, I want to be remembered for what I have given, not for what I have taken. And I think here we are in Tallahassee with 3 pretty important weeks left in a legislative session, and the media is going to report who the winners were and who the losers were, and we're going to report how many bills and what the budget was and all that good stuff. But I just appreciate, Mike, whether it was you talking about let's focus on what we give, not what we take, or whether it's all of you being here today, I think we're into a couple years now of making a difference. And we're having a different conversation today than we've had in the past. And so much so, our foundation's created something we call the Business Alliance for Early Learning. We're focused on 0 to 8. And anyone who's interested in being part of a business-led solution on this issue, we invite you to be part of this.